Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight on this Thursday, August 15th.
Our court system needs to do a better job of administration of justice.
Cook County Democrats decide which candidates deserve the party's boost.
I think this feasibility study gives us the opportunity to go back and get it right.
After a Las Vegas consultant says current plans for a Chicago casino are too heavily taxed, will state lawmakers change their bets? The tiny Lone Star tick is in Illinois. How to avoid it and how to know if he's given you the Heartland virus. The U.S. stock market is stable after taking a plunge yesterday. Local analysts weigh in on what that means for consumers.
I love it all. So if I'm not singing opera, I'll sing musical theater. If I'm not singing musical theater, I'll sing jazz.
After nearly 10 years of determination, a local opera singer shares the story of how his voice led him to Carnegie Hall. From the early days of Second City to Steppenwolf Theater and beyond, a new book explores the history of theater in Chicago.
It kind of looks like breakfast cereal now.
I mean, it could be. Anything's breakfast cereal if you're brave enough.
And 3 Chicago favorites come together in this week's Deep Fridays. All that and more next on Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brandis Friedman. A shakeup in Mayor Lori Lightfoot's administration. Paris Schutz has that story and more of what's making news in Chicago Tonight. Paris.
Brandis, the mayor's communications chief is out after just about 3 months on the job. Marielle Sanvelis submitted her resignation to the mayor, saying it was an honor to work for the first African-American female mayor of the city. Lightfoot today thanked Sanvelis for her, quote, incredible contribution. No replacement has been announced. And the mayor and Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson are showing off a brand new tech facility that they hope will help solve crimes. They launched 2 new area technology centers, one in Area Central and the other in Area North. Centers allow police to access private surveillance and cell phone footage. Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson says this will help detectives, especially if a crime happens near a private business when nobody is there on the weekend.
Often what would happen, especially if an event occurred on the weekend, Friday night, through Sunday night, we'd have to wait for the owner of the establishment to come back to work, call us, tell us to come over there, and they would show us the video on their system. We don't have to do that anymore.
Fallen R&B superstar R. Kelly was to have appeared in Cook County Court today. His attorneys appeared there instead for a hearing in his state sexual abuse case. Kelly did not leave federal custody to attend the hearing and faces multiple separate federal charges of sexual abuse, racketeering, and child pornography. Kelly's attorney Stephen Greenberg says the state cases should be put on hold as the federal cases play out.
The fact is that the cases are terribly intertwined, and these cases shouldn't proceed until those cases are resolved.
But the judge said the state trial will proceed as scheduled unless prosecutors decide other cases should take priority. And there's more on this story on our website. Well, Illinois Republicans rallied at the state fair today. The party featured speakers like State Chairman Tim Schneider, State Senate Minority Leader Bill Brady, and some downstate congressmen. They railed against Governor J.B. Pritzker, Speaker Michael Madigan, and the recently passed Progressive Income Tax Amendment. Meanwhile, keynote speaker Congressman Steve Scalise from Louisiana took the occasion to praise the term of President Donald Trump.
You know what's happened since Donald Trump became president? He rebuilt our military. He went back around the world and said, I'm going to stand up to the bullies of the world. He stood up to Russia. He stood up to China. He's standing up to North Korea, and it's yielding dividends.
As for the weather, partly cloudy with a low around 64 this evening, and then a chance of showers and thunderstorms tomorrow with a high near 80. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. Leading Cook County Democrats met for hours this morning as they decide who will get the party's backing in next year's election. Our Amanda Vinicky was there, and Amanda, it seems like we just did this. Isn't it too early for this?
Doesn't it feel like that? My gosh, I know. I want more summer. Yes, the election is still more than a year away, and we don't even know who all is running for what position. The Cook County Circuit Clerk's race is especially fluid after just earlier this week, longtime incumbent Dorothy Brown said that she's not going to run again. So look for that race to get really crowded. Also unclear just how much competition Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx will have as she tries for a second term. Former State's Attorney Bill Conway's running and already put enough self-funding into that race that caps are off. But there's still time for others to try for that position. Even so, this is about the time that party leaders get involved so they can help clear the way for their favored candidate. The focus today, a rare opening on the Illinois Supreme Court.
This party has had an indelible impact on my judicial career, but the party must decide in 2019 whether in this multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-religious county it is going to continue to have a diverse Supreme Court.
Justice P. Scott Neville actually holds a spot on the bench now, but he was appointed to it and he has to win an election in order to keep his seat. But he's facing scrutiny after NBC reported a home that he owns but does not live in has for years improperly received a homeowner's tax exemption. A committee woman asked him why.
The answer to that question is no, there were no irregularities. In fact, the Cook County Assessor's Office reported to members of my committee last night that they found no evidence of wrongdoing. I think that's the best place to look. They have looked, they have searched, they have determined that there's no evidence of any wrongdoing.
The Cook County Assessor's Office didn't quite put it that way. A spokesman says the records from the year 2000, when that exemption was first applied for, were destroyed. That's customary after this long a time. So what records are left don't show who originally applied for it. His name is on the deed, so he's ultimately responsible for repayment of the erroneous exemption and has been in contact with our office about doing so, the assessor's statement says. But an opponent is seizing.
We're talking about the highest court in the state, and that person holding that position has to be have the highest integrity. And we're going to question, can a person who gets a tax bill that says you're getting a homeowner exemption on a property you don't live in and does it for any number of years, can you be comfortable with that in that type of situation?
So Amanda, where does that leave things?
Well, Neville and House that you just heard from, they're just 2 of the 7 candidates that are running for this seat. They are definitely considered the front runners, at least when it comes to getting the nod from the Democratic Party, which is a big deal given that many voters just gloss over judicial races. Neville's favored by the Cook County Democratic Party leader, Tony Preckwinkle, and appears to have a lead going into tomorrow. That's when party leaders will vote on which person gets on the slate. Now, both men are black, and that's a big deal because every other Illinois Supreme Court justice is white. Whoever wins next November's race will fill a seat formerly held by Illinois' first ever African-American Supreme Court Justice, Charles Freeman. Now, another candidate, Judge Jesse Reyes, is Latino. He also says he's got a goal of bringing diversity to the justice system. But perhaps recognizing he wasn't bound to get the endorsement, Reyes was one of the candidates who asked the party to sit this race out.
This office, unlike no other office, our Supreme Court is the epitome of impartiality. If there is one office that needs to be viewed through the lens of who is best to serve the people versus our political interests, it is the Illinois Supreme Court. I would suggest that we do not slate anybody in this position. Let the people decide who should sit in the people's court.
And that's really the open, the right way, the democratic way.
Now, a lot of questions from committeemen and women were about bringing more diversity to the courts, but Judge Sheldon Shelley Harris says the party shouldn't focus so much on that, leading to this testy exchange in which Alderman Jason Irvin asked Harris if he knows what white privilege is.
Do you understand the notion of white privilege? I'm just asking, this is a question. You're saying that this is equal. I'm asking you, do you understand the notion of privilege?
I don't mean any disrespect, sir, but I think you're off base if you think you're being equal if you pick a candidate based upon their race, color, or creed, or sex. That's what your people have been fighting for years.
Now, Brandis, we'll learn tomorrow what Democrats do with each of those 7 candidates, who they pick. That's also, of course, when party leaders will hear from State's Attorney Kim Foxx and also from those candidates, many of them anyway, for Circuit Court Clerk.
More to come, a lot to watch. Thank you, Amanda. And now to Paris Schutz and the future prospects for a Chicago casino. Paris.
Brandis, Mayor Lori Lightfoot signaled it's back to the drawing board on a Chicago casino. This after a consultant concluded that none of the city's 5 proposed sites would be financially feasible. The financial structure is too onerous, the study says, and any potential operator would have to pay what amounts to 72% in taxes. So should lawmakers revise this plan? Joining us are State Senator and Assistant Majority Leader Terry Link, who represents Illinois' 30th District. That includes Waukegan, Mundelein, and Wheeling. Link was Senate sponsor of the legislation that massively expanded gaming in this state. Also, Alderman Gilbert Villegas of the 36th Ward, who is Mayor Lightfoot's floor leader in the City Council, and Michael Wenz, Associate Professor of Economics at Northeastern Illinois University, where his research interests include casino gambling and economic development. Welcome all of you to Chicago Tonight. State Senator Link is one of the main authors of this bill and proponent of it for years and years and years. Do you agree with this study that the way it's written, a Chicago casino is just not going to work?
No, I don't agree with it. And it's no offense to the mayor or anybody else in the city. I think the problem was the 5 locations that were presented were not adequate locations to gain the most revenue for the city of Chicago. And I think that's what you're looking for, is location, location, location. And by that, they would have generated more money for the city, and that was our ultimate goal for them.
So if they had put a location, a proposed site around the loop?
Well, I think around the loop, McCormick Place, Navy Pier, somewhere in that vicinity, and said it, and then did the study on it, then it would have been different. I think this is a $1 billion plus casino dollar, and when you get that, it's going to be a positive endeavor for the city.
Alderman Villegas, do you agree with that the sites were what was fraught here and not the financial structure?
No, so, you know, the feasibility study was some language that was inserted by the mayor because we wanted to make sure that the study actually determined locations around the city to make sure that it was profitable and would generate enough income, a ton of income for the state as well as the city.
And we're looking at the proposed locations right now. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but the study says that regardless of the 5 states that were, the 5 locations that were identified, or anywhere downtown, it's just not feasible. Right?
And the locations we should clarify are Harbor Side on the south side, as you're seeing there, and then you saw a site on the west side, Michael Reese Hospital, a site near Guaranteed Rate Field. Michael Wenz, do you agree with the conclusion here that there's really no private operator that's going to be able to finance something like this if the profit margin is so low?
I think that the study is not particularly good substitute for a developer. A developer, when they request for proposals, the developer will come in and do their own analysis, and the financiers will come in and do their own analysis, and they'll come to their own conclusions. With regards to this feasibility study that looks at the 5 locations, it's limited in the questions that it can address. A developer will come in and try and figure out a way to do this profitably, and it's difficult to convince me that there's not a way to run a profitable casino in the city of Chicago somewhere.
You think there's a developer or casino operator out there that's willing to look into this and pay 72% in taxes, basically?
Well, one of the notes that the study refers to is the casino in downtown Boston that opened at a development cost of over $2 billion. The study estimated this one at $750 million in construction, plus another $700 million or so in taxes and licenses in round numbers. That's $1.3 billion in development costs. The casino in Boston is more than double that, and private financiers were willing to take that kind of a gamble.
Senator Link, Mayor Lightfoot says lawmakers need to go back to the drawing board and redo this. Is there any appetite to do that?
I don't think it is right now. I think what we want to do is, and Michael, I thank you for what you just said, because that's what we've been arguing at this whole point. I think we put the cart ahead of the horse in here. I think and trust me, I don't ever want to tell the city of Chicago what to do, but I think if they would have brought a developer in there, had somebody, even if there wasn't a person they were going to hire, to have them check what possible sites would be the best facility to put a facility at, to look at the cost factors in there, and I think you would have had a win-win situation.
Alderman Villegas, what is a better financial structure in your mind?
Well, I think that when we take a look at the transition that occurred from Mayor Emanuel to Mayor Lightfoot, and everything that was going on with the Capitol bill, and I really appreciate Senator Link's continuing to work on this issue for years, and finally it comes to fruition. Second time, right? Because we talked about it, Governor Quinn vetoed it the first time, but now we're here, and we're saying is that the feasibility study that was conducted just doesn't show that any locations right now, given the onerous taxes that are put there, would be profitable. So we just want to. I think we should, now with the new administration in there, we should talk about it during the veto session and find out.
And you know, there was transition. They didn't have a whole lot of lobbying muscle down there. And you kind of made this point in a tweet that you kind of think that it was the other gaming interests, the competing gaming interests, that wrote that into the bill so that Chicago wouldn't succeed.
Well, when we take a look at some of the previous language that was some of the casino language before, I think it was more in favor for Chicago. Unfortunately, this language that comes out, I think the structure doesn't work for us right now.
And Michael Wentz, is this correct that this would be the highest tax that any casino operator would pay in the country?
That's correct. These are very high tax rates and the highest relative to other U.S. casinos.
Is there a structure that you think would be more amenable for both the city and for a private operator?
Well, the goals, usually they're sort of twin goals of economic development when it comes to casinos. The first one is to create jobs and economic activity and economic growth, and the second one is to raise tax revenue. And those two, with regards to locations and structure, those two things don't always overlap perfectly. The highest revenue generating locations are going to be the ones that have the highest demand for casino services, downtown and Navy Pier and McCormick Place, and the places that Senator Link mentions. The places that do economic development don't exactly match that. And so if the goal is to generate economic development and jobs, it's good to try to figure out a way where you can be close to potential employees and also close to potential gamblers, but you don't want those necessarily to come from the same population. You know, some of the South Side sites, for instance, will tend to draw from local neighborhoods, both in terms of gamblers and in terms of jobs.
Senator Link, part of the gaming legislation is 5 other new casinos, one probably in your state Senate district. Does this give these other casinos kind of a head start? I mean, because studies say there really isn't a whole lot of appetite for more gaming. If more casinos come in, it might take business from existing casinos.
In this particular case, I don't think you'll have any effect from any one of the new casinos affecting the Chicago casino. And again, I want to allude to what Michael just said. You know, when you're looking at this, we're trying to look at outside dollars coming into Chicago in there. You've got a numerous amount of hotel rooms that are being used every day of the year. If you've got a small percentage of those people going to a casino, it's going to be hugely successful. And I don't think we want to get, you know, we can use this money. Whatever money is generated, you're getting it to the police and fire pension payments, and which is a huge savings, and that's why we did it for the city in that nature. So if we were to take this money and redo the structure, who are going to take it from, the state or the pension? And if we did that, we're hurting the rest of the taxpayers of Chicago and the state of Illinois.
So you're saying that the structure is set up so the city and the state can get the most tax revenue. What about to what Alderman Villegas was saying is this was kind of put in there by competing gaming interests that really don't want to see the Chicago casino succeed?
You know, I respect the alderman. I've known him for a long time. I'll tell you right now, there was none of that went on whatsoever. No competing interests. We, at the end, decided what was going to go in the bill. We heard from everybody through the years of what they wanted, and then we fine-toothed the bill to what we wanted it to say and do. So there's going to probably be people pointing fingers at a lot of things that were done in there, but I can guarantee you no competing interests had that foot in the door.
Alderman Villegas, math is going to be difficult here, so if you're asking lawmakers to go back and reconsider, how are you going to get suburban lawmakers and downstate lawmakers to essentially do something for the city of Chicago that could be not so beneficial for them?
Well, we got to remember that the city of Chicago is the engine of the state. And so I think all the senators and state representatives want to see Chicago succeed because in turn, the state benefits. So I think that this is an opportunity for the representatives and the senators and the governor as well to take a look at just taking maybe adjusting some of the tax structure so that way it's beneficial for both the city of Chicago as well as the state.
Michael Wentz, this feasibility study said that the best or most beneficial structure might be a publicly or city-owned casino with a private manager. How have those tended to work out in other cities?
That would be an unusual structure with regards to urban casinos. There are quite a few, for instance, tribal-owned casinos across the country, and some of those have been successful, others not. Some of those have been successful in generating economic development in places where it isn't otherwise forthcoming. With regards to urban casinos, essentially all the urban casinos across the country, New Orleans, Detroit, St. Louis, are privately owned and operate under that kind of a structure.
Senator Link, if lawmakers were to reconsider this, do they have to bring like Rivers Casino to the table? Do they have to bring the Duchossois family from Arlington Park to the table?
Well, the problem you do on this is no matter how we do this, we're going to be hurting somebody in it. I think a lot of things that can be done on this. I mean, in some of these locations that were granted a license, they're going to work with the developer. They may rent the land that they give them for $1 a year for the next 99 years. I know some of them are in TIF districts. They'll be looking for TIF money. But if we were to go down there into Springfield, and trust me, I've been doing this a lot of years, and it was like herding cats when you were trying to get this together. One of the biggest problems you're going to face is if we did this, all we're doing is making a developer richer. We're not helping the citizens of the state of Illinois or Chicago. We're making a developer with more money.
So what you're saying is there's ways for the city to sweeten the pot for a developer.
Correct.
All right, State Senator Terry Link, Alderman Gilbert Villegas, and Michael Wentz from Northeastern Illinois, thank you all for being here. And there is more Chicago Tonight just ahead, so please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Allstate. Allstate is investing in Chicago's youth. We believe good starts young. That's why we're helping our youth develop the skills they need to achieve success in life. Allstate is proud to empower the next generation of leaders.
And still to come on Chicago Tonight, this little tick with the white spot on its back, it's all over Illinois. How do you avoid it? And how to know if it's given you the Heartland virus? What might the average consumer expect since U.S. stocks took a hit? Local analysts are weighing in. A local opera singer shares the impact the Chicago Children's Choir had on his musical journey. The sprawling history of theater in Chicago is explored in a new book. And what do Polish sausage, potato chips, and Plockman's mustard have in common? They all come together to make a delicious snack. Who's hungry? But first, we're going to take a short break to ask for your support of this program and to tell you how you can come to a fun event and meet the whole Chicago Tonight team right here in our studios. So stay right there.
Hello, Chicago Tonight viewers. I'm Phil Ponce. Chicago Tonight is unique in the world of local television.
So just a second.
No, Tony Perquinkle,
just a second. As we did that, what we found is that violence went down.
You're giving speeches. I really would prefer answers. Okay. Well, we ask the tough questions you want answered. Chicago Tonight has the honor of bringing you a wide variety of stories from some of the best journalists in the city, and we do it in depth. No other Chicago television station tackles the stories we do in the way we do, both on the air and online. We're taking a quick break because we need your support. You know that independent, unbiased journalism is more important now than ever before. On Friday, September 20th, join me and my Chicago Tonight colleagues for a fun, behind-the-scenes look at the new administrations in Springfield and at City Hall. We will explore the policies and the players in a freewheeling discussion, and you can join in the conversation as well. Here's how.
For a donation of $100, you will receive a ticket to this event at the WTTW studios in Chicago. Please go online now at WTTW.com/news or call 773-588-1111 to sign up. Any amount helps keep Chicago Tonight strong, but if you contribute $100, you will receive a ticket to this unique event. Tickets are limited, so don't miss this opportunity. Again, it's Friday, September 20th at our WTTW studios.
For more than 30 years, Chicago Tonight has connected you to your community. You can trust us to bring you in-depth, unbiased coverage of the stories you care about most, but we can only do it with your help.
So please go online now at WTTW.com/news or call 773-588-1111 to reserve a seat at $100 each for a Chicago Tonight behind-the-scenes look at Springfield and City Hall. You can join in the conversation and meet the whole Chicago Tonight team.
Thank you for supporting the work we do, and I look forward to seeing you here in September.
Okay, so here's a subject we'd all rather not talk about or even think about. Ticks. The tiny insects are so good at transmitting potentially dangerous illnesses like Lyme disease that we're wise to give them our attention now and then. And now, in Illinois, we're on the lookout for ticks carrying a relatively new disease called the heartland virus. Here to tell us about that and other public health issues like West Nile virus and vaping is Dr. Ngozi Ezike, Director of the Illinois Department of Public Health. Dr. Ezike, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I understand the heartland virus is relatively new.
It is. I wasn't aware of it in medical school. In fact, it was only characterized and identified 10 years ago. So just in the last 10 years, this even came onto the radar. So very new.
What are some of the symptoms?
So it's very nonspecific, like any kind of flu-like syndrome, fever, malaise, body aches. You can also have diarrhea. So indistinguishable from other, some other tick-borne diseases and other flu-like illnesses.
What is the treatment for it?
So there's no specific treatment. It's more supportive care. If you're having diarrhea, something to help calm that. If you're having a fever, medicines to decrease the fever. Pain medicines to deal with, the body aches or the headaches.
Is it very serious?
So again, it being so new, it's kind of hard to characterize. We've only had one case that we have had here in Illinois. So it's something we're still looking at. The CDC is not even having it as a notifiable disease yet, but they are encouraging people who may diagnose it to voluntarily share that information.
And so you said you've only had one human case, but you found lots of ticks carrying this.
Yeah, so we know that the Lone Star tick, which is ubiquitous in Illinois, the Lone Star tick does carry this heartland virus, which can cause the disease. So people may be familiar with the Lone Star tick. It has that white dot in the middle of its back. And so the best way, since there's not really a treatment and we're still kind of learning more about it, is to try to avoid ticks in general.
And so let's take a look at several of the different kinds of ticks because, like you said, they can carry different viruses. The Lone Star tick, that's on the left side of the screen there, it's the one that carries the heartland virus. Wood ticks are the largest and the easiest to spot, but generally the least dangerous. And the deer ticks are the ones that carry the Lyme disease, which we all know can be quite serious. So where so far have the Lone Star ticks been found in the state?
Right, so it's throughout the state. It's not one specific part of the state. So the Lone Star tick has been around for a while. So that, the presence of the tick is not the issue. It's this new virus that it can get infected with, which is rather new. Again, just identified in the last 10 years.
And what's the best way to prevent coming in contact with these ticks?
Right, so in general, because we know that ticks stay in like wooded or shrubbery, in tall grass. If you're going to go through those areas, you wear long clothing, guards or protective clothing. Wear insect repellent, something that contains oil of eucalyptus or DEET, permethrin. You want to try to avoid, if you're in a path that's very wooded and grassy, you might want to stay in the middle of that path, because it's when you rub against the shrubbery that the tick can crawl onto you. So it's kind of an opportunist. It doesn't really fly, so if you give it the opportunity, then it can crawl onto you.
Right. And so we actually have some video, and it's something people need to see. It's not necessarily the most fun to look at, but we actually have a look at what a tick looks like. There he is, you fat little guy with very tiny legs. But if a tick has already latched on, how do you remove it?
Right, so if you're aware that you have a tick, you do want to see if you can get tweezers with a fine point to get into the tick and grab it firmly and pull it straight up and out. You don't want to use your bare hands, of course, and then after you remove it, you want to wash your hands and the area with soap. and soap and water.
Okay, what do you do with the tick? Just toss it aside, imagine? Okay. Let's also talk about vaping. We learned today that a vaping industry group has sued the government to delay review of e-cigarettes. Earlier this week, we talked about a new IDPH report on vaping, but since we've got you here, remind us what you found, please.
Right, so we are right now in the midst of a serious investigation. We have had 6 cases. Actually, the number, we've gotten some more cases over this week. We have 10 cases of illnesses that fit this case definition, where we have people who come down with severe respiratory illness, people otherwise healthy that we would not expect such severe illness, that have the link that they have recently vaped. It's resulted in hospitalizations, ICU, intensive care unit hospitalizations. People have had to be on mechanical ventilation. And so we are looking into this. We have another 12 cases that we are looking at as possibly connected to the 10 that we already know are associated with this. So our partners in Wisconsin have also identified multiple similar cases. So we are looking closely at this, working with our Wisconsin neighbor and even involving the CDC to kind of get a hold of this. But this investigation is very active and we're still trying to get a lot of information.
It seems like some people are allured to vaping because it's thought to be safer to vape tobacco versus burning it and smoking it. But it sounds like that's not the case. We don't know what's going on here.
So again, this is new. We know that many, many young people have taken this on. They come in, different flavors that people may try to partake, but definitely there are dangers associated with it. These cases that we're looking at right now are suggestive of that. So people are using it in different ways, different products, and again, our investigation is still early, but we're trying to find out what exactly was happening with all of these young people to have such severe illness associated with the vaping.
And Dr. Ezike, this is the first time we've had you on the show since you took on this new role earlier this year. What else is on your radar in your position?
So there's so much. I'm so honored that Governor Pritzker gave me the opportunity to serve in this capacity. One of the governor's first executive orders was around getting to zero Illinois. So that is the ambitious but attainable goal of getting to functional zero in 10 years, where the HIV/AIDS virus will no longer be an issue. So we're working hard to make that successful, so that by 2030, HIV/AIDS will be a thing of the past.
Okay, Dr. Ngozi Ezike, Director of the Illinois Department of Public Health, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And up next, Paris Schutz talks to local analysts about what yesterday's stock market plunge means for consumers. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
A relatively uneventful day on Wall Street today. That's a sigh of relief for investors and really anyone worried about their retirement after this week's wild ride. Yesterday, the Dow had its worst performance of the year, plunging 800 points. Some economists point to the U.S.-China trade war and other global indicators that a recession could be forthcoming. President Trump has taken the moment to lash out at the Federal Reserve. So where exactly does the truth lie? Joining us are Susan Schmidt, head of U.S. equity at Aviva Investors, and Brian Battle, director at Performance Trust Capital Partners. Welcome both of you back to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you, Paris.
Susan Schmidt, in short, what happened yesterday?
Oh my gosh, down 3% is what happened, and we haven't seen that in a while. The first time we've seen that sort of move in 2019. And the stock market just reacted very badly on concerns that global growth is slowing. We saw some negative economic data out of Germany, which implies that Europe might be slowing. And then we also saw some okay numbers out of China, but not enough to comfort people. So there's concern that global growth is slowing, and ultimately that leads to U.S. growth slowing as well.
Concern that global growth is slowing. Brian Battle, do you look at yesterday as an anomaly or the beginning of a trend?
I think it's an anomaly. You know, if you look at the stock market so far this year, it feels like a disaster. We have recency bias. Oh my gosh, the wheels are falling off. But you look at the stock market in a 12-month from last August to this August, we're up about 1%. So the market is holding in just fine, and this is reflective of the economic growth. Let's make sure we separate the two things. The stock market is not the economy, and what happened yesterday was headline risk, and the stock market just trying to absorb all this international.
What do you mean when
headlines.
you say headline risk?
Headline risk,
the
yeah.
news.
The news, the political risk which is something the market isn't very good at pricing. Is political
Susan
risk.
Schmidt, what kind of factor is the trade war between the U.S. and China having on the performance?
I think it has a big impact on the market because the dialogue is extended for so long and the market seems to be getting increasingly skittish about it. I think the market was looking for comfort from second quarter earnings calls where CEOs had a chance to come out and talk about how their businesses were performing, and CEOs were largely reluctant to be overly confident because they don't know what the future holds. And so until they have a good idea of what these trade wars and new tariffs mean, they can't really describe how their profitability of their companies might be changed.
So there's just a lot of uncertainty right now. And speaking of how the future is going to go, this whole notion of the inverted yield curve has been thrust into the public consciousness now. Brian Battle, what is that?
So when you describe the inverted yield curve, usually if you lend somebody money for a short period of time, you get a low interest rate. For a long period of time, you get a higher interest rate. So what's happened recently is long-term yields are lower than short-term yields. So that is an inversion. That's not typical. And so a lot of concern about the inverted yield curve is when the yield curve inverts, it usually signals a recession. But this time, the yield curve is inverted because of central bank policy. So we're in a period of experimental monetary policy. We've had really low rates for 10 years. And so as we start to unwind that, unexpected things happen. Like the yield curve inverts, long bonds get really low, and then the stock market rolls around 800 points on a
So you're
Tuesday.
saying this inversion isn't necessarily a result of people expecting a recession. It's the result of people expecting a tightening of rates from the Fed.
Well, it's a result of people wondering what's going on and saying, I need safety. And so the flight to safety, I'm going to park it somewhere, largely internationally. In the U.S., we're doing incredibly well. The U.S. consumer has held strong throughout this. We saw retail sales this morning, a positive 1%. That was a big positive surprise to the market. And I think that speaks to the strength of the spend here in the U.S. People are worried internationally. 70% of global yields are negative. So we have a lot of international investors seeking safety, coming to buy our bonds, our long-dated bonds, pushing that yield down. And so we're getting this inversion as others seek safety in our market.
Brian Battle, the president lashed out, or he's continued to lash out at the Fed. Does he have a point that the Fed's started raising rates too quickly to prevent a so-called overheated economy?
I don't think so. The Federal Reserve has rates at a really low level right now, and a quarter point higher or lower really won't affect the economy. That's politics. And so that's the thing that we're feeling in the market is this political tension. Trump is mad at the Fed president. He's mad at the Chinese. He's mad at the Germans. Will that turn into actual economic damage? So that's what the market's trying to price in. We're used to the president saying extraordinary things and using Twitter, but now he's taking one of our biggest trading partners and threatening them, and he's been doing it for a long time. That turns into a real economic problem. To Susan's point, though, the U.S. consumer has held up pretty well. The economic statistics are okay. The U.S. economy is slowing down, but it's not a disaster. So what we're seeing in the market is headline, the news bouncing the market around, not a lack of confidence.
But I do think that we've gone through several rounds of tariffs, and this next tranche of tariffs was going to impact the U.S. consumer more. And
Right.
I think that's why the market got more skittish. Also, we're in the middle of the summer. This is when a lot of people go on vacation. The market tends to be more knee-jerk reactive right now. And so you saw a lot of that nervousness and reaction, I think, reflected in yesterday's price movement.
And one of the things the president keeps saying is that this trade war is affecting China's economy more than it's affecting the U.S. economy or U.S. consumers. Is there evidence to support that?
Absolutely right. So, so you have to be careful about the statistics coming out of China because we're not sure how good they really are. But they're admitting that their economy is slowing down, and it's the slowest rate they've had in years. So yes, that they're admitting it's slowing down means it's really slowing down. So it is affecting China. The question is, who has more patience? Will the Chinese wait out the President Trump until he gets unelected, or is Trump going to hang in there and be tough until he gets elected? So there's political tension.
It's like a political, geopolitical, global game of chicken. But Susan Schmidt, I mean, when the U.S. economy is performing okay, but there are global indicators that the global economy is not doing well, and China's economy is intertwined with the U.S. economy.
Yes.
What wins out here?
Well, we don't know, and that's what the market is wondering. That's the problem. There's no
Right.
clear-cut answer here. I do think that the retail numbers that we saw today were very important. We're going to get numbers on consumer confidence tomorrow, and so far those numbers have held up very well, and the consumer feels good about where they are. I think 70% of our GDP is from the consumer spend. And as long as the consumer confidence holds, we should be all right here in the U.S.
That's right. Recessions are caused or driven by or sustained by confidence. Right. If average people are like, I'm not sure if I'm going to have a job, I don't know if I should buy that car, that's what causes a recession. People lose confidence.
We can talk ourselves into this problem. And unfortunately, that's where we are. We're worried about that.
But if there are global indicators that the global economy is slowing down, even if the U.S. economy is still relatively strong, does that pull the U.S. economy down?
Not necessarily, because the U.S. depends a lot on domestic spending. China is an export economy. They depend on selling stuff to us. So the U.S. can be self-sustaining no matter what happens around the world. It gets more expensive or cheaper depending on what our trading partners are doing, but the U.S. is the driver of global GDP, and what happens here matters to everyone else, not so much the other way around.
Susan Schmidt, bottom line, do you think we're on the verge of a recession?
No, I don't. I think we have to watch the U.S. consumer and hope that confidence holds, but I think the retail numbers today and general okay reports from companies on their earnings in the second quarter lead us to think that things are stable and businesses still have some positive operating margin ahead of them.
And Brian Bettel, I would guess that you would advise investors or regular everyday folks, just leave your money alone. You're fine.
Well, you should know what you own. Make sure you have a good balance. I say that all the time, but don't watch the headlines, because the markets are driven by traders right now and by all this political stuff that's going on. Concentrate on what's going on in the economy. Right. How is it going in your neighborhood? We talk to a lot of lenders around the country, and they're lending. The economy is doing all right. It's different, region to region, but the economy feels like it's okay. Just you have to hang in there and make sure you have a plan and have some discipline around it. But you have to understand where your investments are.
Susan Schmidt, Brian
Ignore the noise, go for it.
All right, short and sweet. Susan Schmidt, Brian Bettel, thank you as always.
You're welcome.
1 year turned into nearly 10 for Keenan Kyles when he put his dream on hold by taking a job to pay the bills. Eventually, he said enough is enough and decided to take his passion and his career more seriously by pursuing it full time. Arts correspondent Angel Edo shares a story of how Kyles' determination delivered him to the doors of Carnegie Hall.
While other kids were watching cartoons or playing sports after school, Keenan Kyles was singing. At age 8, he joined the Chicago Children's Choir and would sing there until he was 18. It was during those 10 years, Kyles says, he really gained an appreciation for both classical and opera music.
It was just such an amazing thing to be able to stand next to somebody who might have not been in the same social class or financial class as you, but we all had one goal, and that was to make music, and nothing else mattered. And I think that's where I really gained my love for music and diversity.
But even among that diverse group of people, Kyles says he wasn't really aware of the power of his voice. It wasn't until he was singing while attending Morgan Park High School that he realized his potential. While his peers were singing jazz and gospel music, Kyles was singing in Italian.
My music teacher at the time was Richard Nunley, and Richard Nunley gave me my first art song, classical song, and it was Amarelli Mia Bella. And so we were working on it, and he was teaching me the Italian and everything, and I was like, wow, maybe I do have
Kyles went on to study music at Columbia College Chicago. When it came time to graduate, he was faced with a hard choice: pursue his passion or pay the bills. But that didn't stop Kyles. He continued to train with a man whom he describes as his musical father.
One of the most important things that Andy does is celebrates my accomplishments, but right after that, he'll always give me room for growth.
What sets Keenan apart, I think, is that he is a hard worker. He doesn't want to be mollycoddled. He wants to be challenged. And he knows that when there are challenges, it means that there are things that he has a target for, things where he can see his own growth and his own development.
Now, Keenan spends several hours a day training young singers, and he says when he's encouraging them to believe in themselves, he's also encouraging himself.
Sometimes I have to teach them, I have to look back after I'm done with a student and say, I think I need to work on that as well. Because as a teacher, they always expect you to have the right answers and be confident and be strong and assertive, but we also have those same type of insecurities. And sometimes working through those insecurities with them helped me to like find some things about myself that I need to better.
Kyle's determination finally led him to a role as Dagu in Chicago Opera Theater's Moby Dick. He was invited back for the world premiere of Freedom Hall in spring 2020. But the show doesn't stop there.
Going to Carnegie Hall in the fall. Yeah, and I'll be doing like a small little private recital. So I'm excited for that.
And he says after being denied 7 times by the Lyric Opera of Chicago, Kyles was invited to be a part of their outreach program, Lyric Unlimited.
I'll be working with them in the fall. They're doing a new opera called Earth to Kinsey. And the outreach program pretty much goes around to different CPS schools and performs like this opera for the students.
Kyles hopes to influence CPS students long-term, helping them realize their potential the same way his mentors helped him.
I am composing my own opera, and it's called The Pilot Finding Your Wings. And it's really to engage the youth and children of Chicago. And I'm gearing it towards schools that are at risk in low-income areas, just so they can see somebody there who looks like them and give them hope and inspire them to do something that is not always the norm.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
Kyles will perform in Chicago Opera Theater's world premiere of Freedom Ride, February 8th through the 16th at Roosevelt University's Studebaker Theater. And now to Brandis and a tome for our times. Brandis.
Paris, thank you. It is a tome. You know, a new book takes a Studs Terkel approach to the theater scene in Chicago. Ensemble is an oral history of Chicago theater told by the people who made it. And joining us now is the author and interviewer of Ensemble, Mark Larson, the man who made the book. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So before we get to the book, we have a bit of a treat. It's a clip of you on WTTW back in 1995 when you won the Golden Apple Award. What do you remember from that day? There you are.
Look at me.
Because you started as an educator.
Oh my goodness, yes. I was told there'd be a surprise. I didn't know that's what it was going to be.
How did you end up making the turn from educator to theater buff, writing a book?
I was a teacher at Evanston Township High School for about 14 years, and I absolutely loved doing it. But I was offered a job at the Field Museum, and that kind of plucked me out of the classroom for a while. Went from that to Lincoln Park Zoo, then I taught at the college level, and then once I retired from teaching at the university, I started on this book.
So, about the book, why did you choose to call it Ensemble?
I knew pretty early on that that's the title, that was going to be the right title, because two things really. Chicago is known for its ensembles. There's Steppenwolf Ensemble, Black Ensemble Theater, Gift Theater. But on another level, I was picking up from the interviews I was doing that the whole city, the whole theater community tends to operate as a kind of ensemble, where they're helping each other out, they're working together, trying to make the other look good, the way an ensemble would.
And so you write about the roots of some of these folks, and we have pictures of two from your interviews. We've got Tracy Letts and Michael Shannon. Tell us about their early days.
There's a really interesting story about their very early days. Michael Shannon was about 17 years old, and he had auditioned for a show at the Next Lab in Evanston, and Tracy was going to be in that, and Dexter Bullard was the director, and they couldn't decide if they really wanted this guy. He's 17 years old. They saw like raw talent there. They kept saying, "This guy's really good, but does he have the discipline we need?" And Tracy and Dexter went back and forth, and finally they decided they're going to hire him. But what's really interesting about that is Michael says in the book that it's no exaggeration to say that little conversation kind of led to everything else that happened in my life.
It's all worked out for him.
It's worked out pretty well, yeah.
You also dedicate a chapter to Tracy Letts' play, August Osage County.
Yes.
What's the significance of that show, both to Steppenwolf but beyond?
That was a huge show and a huge undertaking for them. And I think it was a kind of a turning point for Steppenwolf, too. They utilized a lot of their ensemble. They worked as an ensemble, and what's interesting about it was partway through the rehearsal process, they started going, "This is really good. I wonder what's going to happen." And they started thinking about, you know what? I bet this moves to New York. And they tried to. The cast was trying to envision who's going to go. Who's going to go to New York? You know, or who are they going to cast? Meryl Streep. You know, who are they going to cast? And what they ended up doing was taking the entire cast as is to Broadway. And I think it garnered something like 6 Tonys. It got a Pulitzer Prize for Tracy Letts. It went to London, it went to Australia, and it really became a very, very important show for them.
Another one that turned out okay.
That turned out well, too.
So theater can be a cutthroat business, but in your book, play nice is a theme that seems to emerge.
Well, there's a lot of not playing nice, too. There is some of that, but it's not what I was looking for. I was interviewed the other day. Somebody asked me for juicy stories, and I said, I'm afraid to disappoint you, but it's not about juicy stories. It's about how this community came together.
And of course, over the years, some theaters have come and some have gone. Others are still going strong, you know, after decades. What's the key to that success? Is it a matter for some of them of adaptation or dying?
Yes, it's about adaptation, I think, and reinventing yourself. That's a very big component. Some of those that went away at a time when there were people who started to became famous. William Peterson, for example, William H. Macy, David Mamet became famous, and then they started taking off. And what you end up with is, well, where's the company that the audience was coming to see? Where are those folks now? And that was hard to sustain if you don't take a moment to stop and say, well, how do we reinvent ourselves now without these folks? And Steppenwolf has done a really good job of that.
Many people, like you said, they launched careers from right here in Chicago. And we actually have video of Alan Arkin on stage at Second City nearly 60 years ago. What did he say about his time in Chicago?
He's in his 80s now, and I asked him, well, when you look back on your time in Chicago, what do you think? You know, what's that like for you? And I was very surprised by his response. He said, when I look back on it, I sometimes think maybe I would have been smarter to stay in Chicago, because there was a real family feel there. There was a us against the world feeling at Second City that meant a lot to him. And that it stuck with him over all these decades was kind of profound to me.
You just mentioned David Mamet, and last year we actually had him as a guest on the show, and he talked and talked to us, but you seem to have a different experience.
I didn't have that experience, no. I requested an interview with him, and I finally heard from an assistant who said, David doesn't do interviews anymore, but what he'll do is he'll send you, if you send me some questions, he'll give you written responses. And that's really not my style in here. I like to have a conversation. I like to see where the conversation goes. So it was awkward. I presented with 10 questions that looking back, they weren't that great. And so I didn't do a very good job with that.
And you had a lot of conversations, like a lot of them. You also spoke with Harry Lennox, Laurie Metcalf, David Schwimmer, a number of other famous names on the cover of the book. Do you have a favorite interview? It's like picking a child, I know. Favorites,
I know, it is like
stand
picking
out.
A child. A favorite, actually, can I give you 2 favorites?
You sure can.
One is a woman named Joyce Piven, who was part of the Playwrights Theater Club in 1953. And something about her perseverance. She stayed here in Chicago from 1953, and she took a little time away, but then came back, created what's called the Piven Theater Workshop. That's where Harry Lennox was, for example, and Lisi Goranson from Roseanne and the Connors. She stayed until just a few years ago when she was becoming older and needed to be closer to her family in LA, her children. She profoundly affected me, and I don't know what it is. I become even teary when I think about her, but something about her perseverance and her dedication to this work meant a lot to me, and I kept going back to her, actually.
And the second one, before I let you go.
Is Alan Arkin. I mean, he was a hero of mine when I was a kid. I remember watching Catch-22 and the Russians are coming and loving those movies. So I was really nervous. But partway through, he was very relaxed. I finally relaxed with him. And I cherish that interview, I really do.
Excellent. We'll have to leave it there. Congrats on the book. Again, the book is called Ensemble, an oral history of Chicago theater, and you can read an excerpt on our website. Chips and sausage, squeeze a little mustard on top, and it's a classic Chicago lunch. This week on our summer web series, Deep Fridays, our fearless cooks, they might be a little greasy too, Erica Gunderson and Nick Blumberg take those 3 food groups and shrink them down to bite size.
This week, we're going to the land of sausage.
Polish sausage, kielbasa, you'll often hear it called. This is a delicious smoked meat delicacy.
Let's get started. Let's take a look at your sausage. We're kind of going with a double whammy here. We're gonna crust the sausage in crushed potato chips, and then we're gonna top it off with a dollop of mustard.
These smell great.
They smell good. They look sort of intriguing and definitely Midwestern.
Oh, we're getting so many good refried chip bits.
It's a crunchy topping. That would be really good on a salad.
Looks tasty, doesn't it?
I'm not a sausage guy. Or
You
a
can
fry
see this
guy.
week's full Deep Fridays episode right now on our website and check out the others you might have missed. Everything from some delightful deep dish to a brownie disaster.
Brownie disaster. All right. And that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review.
Before we go, an update to a story from earlier. Mayor Lightfoot has just named a new director of communications. He is Michael Crowley. He is the current chief of staff for After School Matters. And we leave you tonight with some high-flying practice runs from the Chicago Air and Water Show coming up this weekend at North Avenue Beach. Check out our website for more events over the weekend. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.